What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So, if you didn't know, and I'd be surprised if you didn't, 28 Years Later came out in theaters yesterday. Haven't seen any final numbers yet. I have heard some mixed reviews. I've heard even, and I don't really rely on other websites like Cinescores, Rotten Tomatoes, things of that nature. But a lot of those aren't giving it the praise, I guess, that was expected, that was going to happen with this film. I mean, it's getting like a B average. I mean, C is more the average, but just above average, like a B minus. And that's a bit it's a bit surprising, not surprising. It's a bit surprising because there was a lot of hype. There were a lot of fans really looking excited to see this film. I was one of them. I was definitely on the 28 Years Later train. Was very pumped to see this film. And then they did the old, in my opinion, bait and switch with Cillian Murphy. How they came out and said, "Oh, Cillian Murphy's he's returning 28 years later. This is the first film of 3. Well, they're considering this first film the third film in the franchise, but the first of a new trilogy." So on and so forth. The trailers that we were getting were absolute bangers. They were great, especially that first one. And that first one is where we are leading. That first trailer, the first full trailer, or maybe it was the teaser, where we got that very eerie recording, and that's where this article and this video is going to be focusing on, is that particular recording. But if you check out our last video on 28 Years Later, the topic itself. I feel there's been a lot of bait and switch here with Cillian Murphy. They announced he's returning, only to find out he really not returning, not in the first film, barely in the second film, and he will or would play a big part in the third film if they happen to get it financed, funded, and if they even make it. I'm sorry. We went into, I think a lot of us, everybody, 100% of everybody went into this when this was all first announced, but that this was a trilogy. They had already finished the first 2 films. They just needed to do the third film. And then as time has gone on, that's when we found out, no, Cillian Murphy's not in the first film. He's more of a producer. He's more as a consultant behind the scenes doing things. And then now in the second film, he's really just in the tail end of the film. But if we happen to get funding, if we happen to get financing for that third film, then he'll play a big part. So what we're pretty much saying is that everything is really hinging on these 2 films. And if these 2 films do not do absolutely gangbusters at the box office, then the third film isn't happening. And it doesn't matter what Cillian Murphy does at the end of part 2, because the third film wouldn't happen. So all that was for nothing. Getting everyone hyped up for his return was all for nothing, except for to get people to go see the film, not either realizing or knowing he's not in the film. So all that to say is, back to that original trailer that we got. Here you see on this article headline, "The Terrifying Chant in 28 Years Later." Danny Boyle explains how a 110-year-old recording came to define the film. And I'll admit that trailer did break records as far as viewing, but I will say it's still probably in the top 10 eeriest trailers I've ever seen, solely based on that recording being used. The sound of it, the scratching of it, every part of that trailer was just absolutely eerie. And I think this could be like a foundational type thing where we see future trailers, when it comes to particular movies, start using potential like old recordings like this to really set the tone for the film. So let's jump in here a little bit. When the first trailer arrived for 28 Years Later, the third installment in Danny Boyle and Alex Garland's masterful series of horror films, it was scary, filled with gruesome images of zombies and a dystopian world. Now, masterful series, I wouldn't say that, only because, again, I don't know what we're really talking about, what's masterful, because they're calling this the third installment, and as I mentioned earlier, this is serving as the third film in the franchise, but first film for the new trilogy. The second film, 28 Weeks Later, was not good. It's one of those films that I rarely go back and revisit and watch. Now, the first film, we all know, 28 Days Later, is an absolute classic horror film, classic zombie/rage virus film. It will always be one of those iconic films. 28 Weeks Later, not so much. Again, it's not, the opening sequence is really good. It's really good, and it does have some spots here and there, but overall as a film, Again, I don't revisit that often. But what makes the trailer even more terrifying is an eerie rhythmic chant by a high nasal voice moving with a military cadence, monotonal at first, but growing increasingly louder and more agitated as it goes on, with the images and haunting musical background growing in speed and intensity as it progresses. That's exactly what that did for this trailer. Somehow somehow in that context, the chant, even though the words seem unrelated to the images, is absolutely horrifying, like a deranged rap song. Its use in the film makes an ominous scene even more so. All right, let's keep going. And side note, I don't expect any spoilers in this article. So I know the movie just came out yesterday, so if you haven't seen it, I'm pretty sure we're going to be safe to say that there's no spoilers in here. I skimmed through this fairly quickly, so I didn't see any spoilers in here. I mean, again, we all know that this chant or poem is used for the film trailer in the film, so that shouldn't be much of a shock to anybody. The chant is actually Boots, a poem by Rudyard Kipling, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, first published in 1903 and intended to convey the maddening monotony of soldiers marching. The direct inspiration was the hundreds of miles British troops were forced to march across southern Africa in the Second Boer War around the turn of the last century, according to the Kipling Society. The recording used in the film is nearly as old as the poem itself, voiced in 1915 by actor Taylor Holmes. It is a dramatic reading that starts off militaristic, as the initial lines set the scene, but his voice is patently hysterical by the end, even as it follows the lockstep rhythm of the first 5 syllables. And we're not going to read that. I think everyone's heard it already, if again, as it relates to the film. The poem has served as a march by a variety of armies over the years, and the recording is frightening enough to have been used for its psychological impact by the U.S. military in its survival, evasion, resistance, and escape schools, SERE. Usually, for something featured so predominantly in a trailer, the poem plays a very small, although foreboding, role in the film. Buttressed with an eerie bass synthesizer, its soundtrack Spike and his father walking to the mainland, which is thick and with infected zombies, and presumably conveys that they are marching to war. Yeah, again, I mean, this goes on just a little bit more. I don't recall there being. I was trying to find the quotes for Danny Boyle as to why he used it, but I mean, we get a good sense of why he uses. I mean, there's a quote here. It's like reverse osmosis. Okay, it was so effective that Boyle was quick to incorporate it into the film. So this is the quote I was looking for. It's like reverse osmosis, he says. It came into the film and seemed to make sense of so much of what we'd been trying to reach for. He also notes that Kipling's words and Holmes' voice echoing across decades in a context neither ever could have imagined somehow take on a new power today. Quote, you have to hold your hand up and say, how is it that something recorded over 100 years ago has that same visceral power that it was always intended to have? It still maintains it. In a TikTok world, it still has that impact. It's amazing. I agree. I think it's just it's going to be one of those iconic trailers that I think will stand the test of time, and I think will be used as an example of how something that was never intended to be used for like a movie trailer or within a movie, and the fact of how old it is, over 110-year-old recording, the fact that it was used in the year 2025, the way it was used, and how it again set the tone for that trailer to break the records it did. Now, I'm not going to talk about the film directly itself. Again, the film just came out yesterday, so I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm not going to mention anything regarding what happens in the film outside of what was just mentioned here in the article. But again, I think we all knew this was going to be used in the film, so again, that shouldn't be a surprise to you. Otherwise, that's the horror news update for this video. I just wanted to kind of cover off on this because we rarely get some behind the scenes of the thought process used by, in this case, Danny Boyle, why something like this would be used in today's world and how it's being used. I always find that this type of behind the scenes stuff interesting. So anyways, that's going to do it for this horror news update. Drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you thought about that original trailer. And if you've seen 28 Years Later, drop a comment in the comment section. Don't put any spoilers. Just drop a comment whether or not it met your expectations, if it exceeded your expectations, or if it outright was like, yeah, didn't like it. It was overhyped. The first one, the original one, is obviously far better. Let us know down in the comment section. And if you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, we'll see you at the next one. Later.